Thank you for this kind invitation to speak to you on humanism, causal analysis, and microvita. My presentation will focus on how we can unpack, understand humanism through CLA or causal analysis. I will conclude with some discussions on microvita and personal change. I think I want to begin with this quote from Dennis Leary. Racism isn't born, folks, it's taught. I have your 2-year-old son, nobody hates naps. End of list. So it's something that's constructed, it's created by our worldviews, our systems, and our headlines, and the deep stories we tell each other. Personally, I lived all over the world, and I remember my experiences seeing others, people different when me, start out in Heathrow in London in 1964. Then we moved to Indiana and quickly started to understand what bullying was about, as was in New York. In Geneva, when we moved there, kids said if I want to play soccer with a group that was from a different country, they wouldn't play with me anymore. Islamabad, Malaysia, Hawaii, Brisbane, Lullaby, and now Brisbane again, I've experienced each group seeing the other group as less or as inferior, in effect, a deep kind of racism, a hierarchy of races and genders. So this is part of our unfortunate global reality. Even if we wish for a transformed world, a more spiritual world, more inclusive world, we definitely have a world in which there's a racial division of labor, a racial division of consciousness, a hierarchy in terms of who's valued, who's not valued. Thus, we see recently the rise of the Black Lives Matter movement, saying very clearly, we need your help. We are in danger. Please assist and support us. Now, the way I'd like to understand these movements, understand humanism, is through a theory of knowledge and a methodology called causal layered analysis. This has 4 levels: the litany, the scientific data, or the headlines, the systems that support that data, the worldviews, the ways of knowing, the epistemes, and finally the deep metaphors underneath it. And I'll explain this more clearly as we apply this to education. So if we look at today in terms of Black Lives Matter, the litany is, what's the problem? Go get a job. You people don't work hard. We do. We're going to imprison lawbreakers. This is based on the worldview of the Protestant ethic. It's a hidden hierarchy. Those who work the hardest go to heaven. The story of the narrative is white space. The alternative view from the Black Lives Matter narrative is there's an issue of social injustice. We want social justice. Systemically, to create that, we need black-to-black business, reparations, defund the police unless they act more morally, ethically. And finally, the headline is, wait, there are no jobs to get, there's slavery. White space creates conditions where it's far more difficult to get jobs. The proto-humanistic worldview changes the metaphor and the headline. The new metaphor is all consciousness matter, nature and humans and technologies. The worldview is new humanism, social equality. Our systemic changes are moving from markets, corporate markets, to co-ops, moving meditation for inner transformation, and a maxi-mini economic system led by artificial intelligence. In this world, purchasing capacity chases you. AI helps to provide work for all. Or if not work, helps create a world where you have to work less, so there's employment for all. Now, in terms of CLA, level 1 are the headlines: lack of jobs, discrimination, being Karen, for example. Level 2, if we wish to change, we have to change the behavior, we have to change the rules of the game. As Malcolm X said, you don't have capitalism without racism. Martin Luther King talked about having a dream of equity, where people are not judged by the color of their skin. So this is a level 2 analysis. Level 3 analysis is the worldview shift. Level 2 are jobs, technology, systems. Level 3 is the culture, how we see the world, the lenses we use. And thus P.R. Sarkar, Sri Sarkar, talks about the movement from ego, family, national sentiment, I'm American or Indian or Australian or Filipino, finally to humanism, and then to move beyond humanism extending love to everything. Now, this challenges traditional social Darwinism. This was developed partly through Herbert Spencer and his work. The view was there's people at the top of the hierarchy and there's people below the hierarchy. Now, that may be due to economic reality, but underneath that is a view of this is how things are meant to be. If you're on the top, God loves you more. If you're on the bottom, God loves you less. Those who are unable to adapt to changing conditions created by science and technology, they should be left behind. This is the world of survival of the fittest. If you see this image, it's very clear. You go from dinosaurs to outer space. The male is underneath the sun. We use nuclear technology. Humans are without bodies. They're thought leaders. They're unconnected to nature. Nature is not important as man is above the earth. Sri Sarkar comes in and says, wait a second, that story does not work. It doesn't create a good society. He challenges social Darwinism to a new story of the pilgrimage where no one is left behind. Everyone's on a journey, a spiritual journey, a physical journey, a mental journey, and everyone is included. If someone's behind, we create systems to support them through individual behavior and legislation. So we have a different type of image of the future. In this, the indigenous, the past are there. Spirit supports inner and outer growth. Technology is embedded into our reality. It's multi and transcultural. The deep views behind every culture in terms of spirit, new humanism, love of nature. So this is essentially include me in, everyone's invited in this future. If you look at the COVID-19 crisis, the most successful nation has not only used rapid science, early decisive decision making, but the metaphor of a team of 5 million, it's deep inclusion. So which way will we go? If we use the CLA methodology of 4 layers, the litany is who wins the race. System, you create rules so you win the race. The worldview is social Darwinism. The narrative is me, myself, and my tribe. Sri Sarkar says, let's switch it to the pilgrimage, from social Darwinism to new humanism, from institutions of privilege to social justice. And finally, our measurement system is not just GDP, but equity. All win in different ways since we're all different. Diversity. We have a quadruple bottom line. People, inclusion, planet, nature, prosperity, greater standard of living, and purpose, deep spirit. So now let's apply this to schools. We've applied this generally to world thought, the state of the planet today, but how does this work on schools? I've run this process with hundreds of organizations. One of my favorite ones is Edmund Rice, Australia. He said, well, we ran workshops with principals and students. And the things the students said is right now our metaphor is generic suit. Our worldview is recall and strive for results rather than knowledge. What does the system of schooling look like? Segregated by status and gender. It's restricted, does not support individual excellence. Schooling is mandatory, it's standardized, outdated, restricted. This is the world we must change. So they imagined a new metaphor, the tailor-made suit. Knowledge is now useful, adaptive as the world changes. We need new types of knowledge, not just testing. Students control learning, they drive the system. Education is equally accessible throughout the planet. The new headline is relevant and adaptable. Everyone has access, and it's flexible and global. If you look at the metaphor again, the generic suit, everyone's the same, to the tailor-made suit. We design and devise systems so students can learn at their own pace. Virtual education certainly helps in this process. When I ran this for a different school system, they changed the language a little bit from the factory, one size fits all, which made sense in the Industrial Revolution, but not in this post-industrial knowledge revolution. It's made to measure. From calendar-based to person-centered. You learn when you want, how you want, the portable educational system. From chronological age to wait, self-determined cohorts. The Economist magazine suggested that it's actually peer-to-peer learning that is one of the best indicators for success. The headline is schools implement curriculum in linear and sequential grade-based approaches. The new headline, schools adopt curriculum based on the individual needs of children. Of course, this will take more work for principals, for ministries, but if we include students in, they can help design these. Now, there's a context for this. With Edmund Rice education, as well as New Humanism, there's a deep spiritual context. Leaders suggested that today's metaphor is the fist, arguing it's one true faith. But the system, faith is being challenged, and it's traditional. They want to be transformed from the fist to the open hand. Community at the service of the world. Reawaken the spiritual search where traditional categories have failed us to satisfy. And most importantly, they want traditional gospel-based spirituality. So this is the shift that they're talking about. When I ran this work with the People's Republic of China, similar ideas came through. Today it's institutional. They wish multiple approaches. It's compulsory. It's passive. They want flexible, diversified. It's still the traditional Asian view. Good education leads to just the job. But what about learning tools about self, the world, and the future? At the narrative level, it's the dragon bounded by the Great Wall to the dragon pulling China to a globalized, different type of education. In Malaysia Ministry of Education, scholars said, aha, today we're in the four-speed world. Conformance, exam, the lecture. Students suggested, well, we want to eat all you can, a la carte. Democratization, self-directed learning. We want to learn from everywhere. Professors said, well, actually, we prefer the omnivore system. Blended learning, partnership, smart pedagogy. We're overwhelmed by administrative work. We need AI, machine learning, we need technology to help us. The ministry said, yes, but we still want to set some of the rules. We want a nutritious buffet so students don't eat junk, pseudo-humanism. We want it to be wholesome. We want to actually direct these partnerships. This is the wisdom of choice. Essentially, this is about challenging the factory. Every school system I work with, they want to challenge the traditional notion of schooling as a factory. Factory, school comes in, follows the factory model. Even when new technologies come in, they still follow standardized, linear, look at the way they sit in this image. This is partly because the imagination of education goes back to images where students are passive. As new technologies come in, it's direct, text to brain, forgetting that it's participation, inclusion, learning from each other, as well as text, as well as experts, that creates the difference, that creates the value. So as we start to challenge this factory, we found principals are nervous about this. They want to be in charge. So part of the work of humanist education is to help principals work towards we're all learners. It's also redesigning spaces for learning, not just a traditional factory classroom. So we have to go from the technical response of the world is changing to an adaptive challenge. Not just a technical solution, but a solution where we become different, act different, and visibly there's indicators that show how we're transforming. When I was working with the Ministry of Education in Norway, they went from the factory to the jazz orchestra. In the jazz orchestra, individual excellence is valued. But so is cooperation. And so is emergence. Let's see what emerges. And the system, the ministry still conducts educational system. Now let's conclude this. We want to use CLA to transform educational systems throughout the world. We're using CLA to understand that humanism has indicator that's measurable, a change in system, a change in culture, and a change in story. But we also have to change. So when I was running this process with one humanistic school, one of the assistants, she said her story is like a mother goose. She's always taking care of everyone. So I said, well, why don't you stop that? She says, well, she feels that she has to. It's a should, duty. But the duty is making her ill. So she was in a conflict now between the world she wanted and the world that was. So we worked with her to change her narrative, her metaphor. It's the deepest level here. So she became an angel with an attitude. She kept the service dimension, but she now had boundaries. She wasn't going to stay till 9 p.m. waiting for parents. Service with boundaries that protected her from Mother Goose to an angel with an attitude. Another group, when we did the CLA of the self, person said he was younger and the people around him were seniors. He said he felt he was an iPhone in a room full of Nokias. So there was hierarchy, that he was special. He wanted to do a good job, but he felt he was too far ahead. At the same time, clearly the Nokias weren't so excited about his story. So he changed it to becoming a co-created chip maker, that he helps make the difference. They design the future together. So if you feel you're different as a teacher, as a principal, whatever your role is in education, you want to find a story that helps you create your vision. The Mother Goose story didn't. iPhone room full of Nokias doesn't help the future that's emerging, the future one wishes for. But there's a last part to this. The work of late Dada Pranakrishananda says, yes, the metaphor moves us forward, but we need a mantra to transform the metaphor. This is called transmutation, where the energy or the microvita from the mantra helps create a different future. The microvita changes the story towards something where you can deeply go towards, where you deeply wish to move towards. Because the core hypothesis, as you think you become. When we use the microvita process with a person who said he was an iPhone in a room full of Nokias, suddenly the co-designed chip maker became the warm, loving sun. And this is exact the transmutation Sri Sarkar is talking about. Education starts as a factory. Today we want education essentially about the transmission of deep love. That love is central in transforming education, self, and other. It moves us from a world of social Darwin's hierarchy to a world of partnership. It moves us from a world where nature is an externality to a world where nature is part of who we are. It moves us in a world where spirit is external to we're part of spirit. So in humanist education is not just the goal, it's actually the path. And this path is what we're all trying to work on and create a different world. Thank you so much for your time.